Hi guys, my name is Greg Kourpanidis and welcome to the Your Revolution podcast, which is brought to you by Revolution Personal Training. I'm an avid trainer and fitness coach who strives to learn from the very best in the world of health and fitness. Join me each episode and we speak to game changers in their chosen field, sharing their story of passion and success. For all podcast related things, please subscribe and check us out on Revolution Personal Training /podcast. Enjoy this episode. Thanks for tuning in to episode 118 of Your Revolution podcast. We're joined today by Mr. Nick Davenport, AKA Mr. Mental Muscle. How's it going?
Hey, what's up, man? It's great. Nice to be on with you.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. How is life treating you on your side of the world?
It's not bad. Just trying to get back in the swing of things, with the world shutting down. I know a lot of businesses in general took a hit. So me and my partner, Phil DeRue, have been working diligently to get our businesses consistently, back on our feet. Because being in the human performance industry, it's like, this is not a necessity. So it's just a matter of getting things in a way that it can make sense for us to keep us going,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, we're definitely going to talk about, Phil DeRue. Like I said, as I was touched before, a lot of people have been following a lot of your recent work through social media and I guess through Phil's channel, but not only your own. But for those who I suppose don't know who you are, I suppose you give a little bit of an introduction, I suppose, who you are and also your background, what it is that you do.
So yeah, I kind of do a little bit of a lot of things, but the main premise is anything that involves brain training, whether it be mental skills, mental health, performance, anything that requires thinking, I kind of dictate. So that could be something as simple as reaction time. So every sport in the sport world needs to be able to react quickly to different stimulus, because if the quicker you react, the quicker you can get the job done. So that's just probably the tip of the iceberg. My background actually is in psychology, and I do have degrees in psychology. So I really deal with the mental side of things in all aspects, but now I'm more kind of put it more in the performance role than like the clinical role.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And in terms of did you start off clinically, or did you what sort of got? I suppose how did you get into sports psychology? And I suppose how did you merge that into kind of like what you're doing now?
Yeah, the story. So to keep it brief as possible, I was a former collegiate athlete, and when I was in college, I was in track and field. I did the long and triple jump, and I went to school to do that. And I had half academic, half athletic scholarships. Mm-hmm. So I had to do a lot of classes and coursework. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I switched majors numerous times. So I had a teacher named Dr. Ian Payton, who was a British fellow who taught at my school. And he got me hooked on psychology. I had to take one class in psychology, but when I took that one class, I was like, you know what? This needs to be my major. I switched it right then that day. So to fast forward that to my higher level, my graduate work, I was doing mental health, so more clinical stuff. And I had a classmate, so just doing my master's, and I had a classmate who said, you would probably like sports psychology. And I'm like, what's that? And mind you, I'm like, it's 2012, so I'm like 24 at the time. And I'm like, I've never heard of sports psychology. Being an athlete, you would think a guy who's interested in the brain and psychology would have heard of sports psychology, but I didn't. So she told me I got my master's in that, and I'm doing mental health, which I was doing with her. And I was like, I need to switch to that. And she said, I wouldn't advise that because it's not very lucrative. And me being the idiot I am, I didn't care. I heard sports psychology, it deals with performance, the mental side, physical. Thus, Mr. Mental Muscle was born that day. Like literally, that was like I would say December or October 2012. So that's around the time Mr. Mental Muscle was born. Literally, I made an Instagram, I think the following month, and I made it Mr. Mental Muscle, and it's been that name since 2012. And I never looked back. I got into sports psychology after that, and why she said it wasn't lucrative, it isn't. But I said I'm gonna find a way to make it worth my while, whether it be financially or just the good feeling of knowing I'm doing something that I love to do. And I haven't looked back since then.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Obviously, for anyone to obviously follow what they're passionate about. I suppose what I'm really fascinated to know in your interest is
was some of it also from you as an athlete? You mentioned you were you were a D1 athlete. In terms of looking at the mental side and that whole sort of the psychology aspect, did you draw it? Was it from like your own experiences as well that sort of led to you being, I suppose, fascinating to kind of pursuing it further? Or, what else? Were there any other factors, I should say?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Like I'm big on like all my methods, whether it be the fit light stuff or the more mental psychological stuff. All of that is drawn from my coursework and what I've learned from the science. But a big part of it too is from what I've seen or done through my own life and seen through my own eyes. So I could say a lot of it comes from either my own experience of overcoming adversity in sport, adversity in life, as an athlete, as just a man in the world, and also seeing teammates or other people around me go through things and saying, okay, I can take what he went through, even though I didn't experience it, but I can draw from that. And I use some of those people, like I've learned from, like their experience. I use them as analogies in some of my mental skill lectures to this day because it's about putting into context. Because anyone can review science. I can tell you about neurons and how the brain adapts to X, Y, and Z, but most people don't care about that, or they just don't know about that. So it's good to bring in context to make people know, oh, I can relate to that. I've never heard of the word neurodegenerative disease, but I know what it feels like to have a bad day and know that ruminating thoughts can lead me down a rabbit hole of depression. Like people understand that if I told a story about that versus me breaking down the neurochemicals and talking about serotonin and dopamine, right? So it's about making the context from my real life experiences or external experiences that I could bring into it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Now, going just a little bit back onto the study as well. Now, something I listened to in a previous podcast you're on is that you actually went, you went back to college literally to get more credits in psychology, like you did like this additional study. Can you talk about this? I find this really fascinating. Yeah.
Okay, you did your research, huh? So yeah, that's something that most people don't know about me, that I got my master's in 2015, but I still went back and took doctoral level classes because I felt like I can't be I won't say world leader because I'm not a world leader, but I like to say I've done a lot of due diligence to get where I'm at.
Sure.
So I felt like I couldn't do that in my own heart without knowing what I'm talking about. Because not knocking anyone, because if anyone's trying to promote this field, I'm all for that. But at the same time, I feel, me personally, I can't speak for everyone, but I personally feel there's certain levels you have to cross. Because when I sat in those classes that I paid out of my own pocket or took out loans for, and no one, it was funny because the teachers would be like, Nicholas Davenport, you're not on any of my advisory lists because, in a doctoral program, you have to be admitted and then you have like an advisor. So I'm in this class with all these other students who are in the program and I'm not. So I had to get approval as a non-degree seeking student. So it's like, who the hell is this guy? And I'm in the class raising my hand. Hey, pick me. Can I say this? So it was good because I learned a lot. But mental toughness in itself, it was hard because it wasn't easy stuff. Like people think, oh, you take these classes, cool. Like, no, this is rigorous coursework. I've written numerous 20+ page papers on topics that I either was kind of familiar with or not familiar with at all. So I had to earn those grades. Like, I got a C in one of them, but I got A's and B's as well. But I took about, I think, 8 classes outside of my master's and doctoral level courses. And I passed, I think, out of 8, I think 4 with A's, maybe 1 or 2 with B's, and I think I got 1 C. And that was in a class that I only got a C because I had something going on in my life that made me fall behind. But basically, I was really working. Like, it's not like I could just go do that and be like, hey, I'm taking these cool doctoral classes, which were cool. But there was the other side of a lot of papers, a lot of discussions, a lot of presentations. So it helped me become better at talking about the subject as well.
No, absolutely. Now, your business obviously is involved over a period of time. We often hear sports psychologists and I suppose the role they play in an athlete. But brain training is probably something that, I wouldn't say I've done too much. I'm sure many people listening might not be familiar with. I suppose, can you talk about what, I guess, cognitive training is? And I suppose what also led you looking, past just the physical training. So I imagine initially you did more sort of strength conditioning as well before you moved into this too. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. So The strength conditioning realm more so because out of college. So this is around the same time I was doing that master's degree in mental health right before I switched sports psych in 2012. So it was money to be made in that field because I don't have to explain to a person what a squat is. Like you said, a lot of people aren't familiar with brain training. So it's kind of like I did strength and conditioning. I got fortunate enough to live in South Florida where a lot of top athletes, football, basketball, baseball, train at. So I got to do some internships with some top level guys. And then I started my own thing, and I made a little money there, but it wasn't like super crazy money. But it's more lucrative than saying, let's make a brain training business. So I kind of segued into that because the name Mr. Mental Muscle was, I ran that first, but it slowly became my way of life because I knew for a fact, just from experience, and you probably can agree with this, everything starts from here. So no matter how fast or how physically gifted I am, if this is not firing off how it should, whether it be cognitively, meaning processing-wise, or psychologically, meaning mindset, emotions, you're not going to do your best, whether that's school, sport, business, romantic relationships. So I always knew there was some connection there, but I didn't fully understand the science. And that's where it came in, me learning more, taking classes, reading books. So it's like my business shifting to the cognitive was more so like, now let me make a construct that puts this into actual applied situations, because you see my drills, you see like Dustin Poirier or Junior Dos Santos or one of my NFL players like Rashard Matthews. And it's like they're doing things that emulate not necessarily the movement patterns. I try to stay away with the movement patterns per se, but more so the limited amounts of time or the stress states that they will face in a match or in a game. And that's kind of my mentality. Can I simulate the mood states, the processes cognitively? Because it may not look like that at face value. You see some lights or numbers or colors. But we think about if I give them 0.4 seconds to take in some external information like an equation and then decide what that equation tells them to do and get to that point and do it, that's not a lot of time. But if they do it in 0.3 seconds, guess what? I can measure that. And that's kind of where the premise of Mind Body One kind of ran with at this point. And I integrate a lot of different factors with that.
Yeah, no, and that actually leads well into my next questions in terms of the athletes. Now, I'm sure from the average eye, a lot of people would think that, cognitive training is like playing games, and things with, the lights and all the flashy things. I suppose initially there would have been maybe some pushback from maybe some of the athletes or people that you're training who probably didn't understand, I guess, the methods. So I suppose you go into, some of those sort of early challenges I imagine you would have faced, I guess, when trying to bring some of this training in. So there's a lot of people who've got they did that old school training, like physical training, and not really familiar with some of these, I suppose, techniques and concepts that you brought in.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of, like, uphill battles I've had to face and still face because I won't say names, obviously, but there's some top-level people I've worked with who scoffed at me like, this is stupid. And I had to sit there and be like, okay, and let it go because I can't, like I said, old school mentality is not that they're right or wrong. It's just that people are comfortable with what they're used to.
Yes.
And we see something not just different, but so out of the lane of what they're used to. It's kind of like, why would I do that? And I had some people giving it a try, and believe it or not, after they didn't do as well on them, they stopped doing it because they didn't like the frustration, which is kind of the counterproductive because that's why I create, because I'm very methodical in my approach. It's like I make them so they do challenge you, do confuse you, make you have to process, because what's the point of it if it's easy and you can just get a high score? That's when it becomes a game. But when I can make it frustrate you in a way that you're attending to multiple stimuli, you're having to keep things in your memory to focus on other things, now it's getting more similar to real life, because at the end of the day, my goal is not to make you the best fighter or football player or airman or military soldier, whatever it is. My goal is to get your brain to be able to process, handle emotions, handle stress, and not the best situations, not the best conditions, and under equipped to do it. Like I do a lot of things that give you little time, little resource, but you still got to do it. Like I expect you to execute no matter what. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm trying to get that brain adapted to these non-adequate situations. And that's where, if I was to say my job title was, that's what my job title is. Get you accommodated. Because you know how people say, you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Correct,
a lot of people do this and say it, but how many people are setting their training up? And I can say, I'm not the only one, but I can say very few are.
Yeah. So would you say it's kind of it's almost like you're simulating like the stresses that the body or the mind could face in certain environments. So you mentioned, I think some of the fighters, but also I think people need to understand as well, like you don't just work with fighters as well. So some of your work also, I think you mentioned, you touched on working with like law enforcement and tactical.
With the law enforcement, I've worked with them. I've worked with some military, some in person, some distance training. I do a little bit of both. But yeah, that's the main idea, because with tactical populations, you only get a few chances to get it right. Like it could go very wrong very fast. And my goal is to, one, like I said, get you comfortable with it going wrong. Because, like, I'll give you an example. I did a tactical training class myself with a Navy SEAL, an ex-Navy SEAL. And I work with him with my cognitive conditioning stuff, but I also participate in his course. So he kind of trains me to be a coach for him. So we kind of barter. And I did a course where we had to pull a sled. It wasn't even heavy. Like I beasted the sled. That was nothing. I'm 218 pounds. The sled probably was all of, I think it was 2 plates, so 90 pounds on the sled. So I pulled it like 30 yards forward, yards back. And then I had to pull out my pistol and shoot targets about 30 yards away. Small targets, like probably this big.
Yeah.
And I promise you, the fatigue wasn't the problem. Like the physical fatigue, it was the mental fatigue, because now my heart rate was so high, my breathing was, I'm not knowing what I should do. And these are kind of things I'm trying to do. Can I get you the process when your heart rate's elevated? Can I get you the process when there's 3, 4, 5 different stimuli going? It's going to detract. There's a lady screaming over there. There's a guy with a gun over there.
Yeah.
Is he good guy, bad guy? Is the guy over the gun? These are things that will happen. And like, I don't know if you knew this, because if you see my page, law enforcement in particular is near and dear to me, because my father is actually a police. He's still serving to this day. I think he'll be retiring next year. And it's like that on top of my job. Yeah. So it means a lot. And it's like crazy if you've been seeing what's happening in America on the news. There's a lot of turmoil going on with with civilians and police officers. And I'm kind of biased one way, because yes, I am a black man in America, but also my father is a police. I'm 31 years old. He's been a police my whole life. 31 years. His career parallels my life. So it's kind of like, I want to sound cliche, but it's like I was meant to do this in a sense, I feel like, because he's going out there and put his life on the line. So when I think about helping these soldiers or these officers I work with, I'm thinking like, that's their son or daughter they can come home to. I'm not saying I'm saving the world. That's not what I'm getting at. But the point is like that millisecond he's reacting could be all the difference, you know?
First, suppose we're expanding on that. You used a really good analogy when I suppose you were describing the benefits of cognitive training, and you described it as being, I suppose, like a tourist and a resident in a city. And I think it'd be a really good analogy if you explain this one, because I think it kind of really, I don't want to say layman's terms, but I think it would really help, like, for people to understand just this benefit of training. I suppose, I don't think I want to keep talking about it because you'll explain it better than me, but I suppose, can you explain this, this analogy that I've seen you've used when describing cognitive training?
That's funny, because I first said that analogy in one of my first ever podcasts in 2017. Dustin had just beat Anthony Pettis, and I got all this new like traffic to my page from him feeling Dustin. I would say from 2017, 2018, I would say most of my following came from them too. So I was getting a lot of requests, and that was one of the first podcasts I did. And I used that analogy off just the top of my head, and I ran with it because, like you said, it makes sense, because when it comes to stress, not to get too scientific, but stress actually is just meaning a change in balance. So our body has a baseline. You have a baseline heart rate, a baseline respiratory rate, how much we breathe. You have a baseline temperature, 98.6, right? So whenever that gets disrupted, that's called stress. So stress is not necessarily an actual person, place, or thing. It's just the fact that our body has changed from balance or resting point away from it. So if I told you to stand up and sit down, that's technically stress. Now, we wouldn't be like, oh, my day is ruined because of that. But that's the first thing I try to get people to understand. Stress is a factor of life. You don't get rid of it. You just understand what stresses you and how it can help or hinder you. So with the analogy of the tourist or the resident, I came with that because if you ever went on a trip, and I think anyone can attend to this, regardless if it's abroad or in their own hometown, or not hometown, but home state or city, and you're driving somewhere or flying somewhere, anticipation is like, oh my gosh, like it seems like forever, right? And that's like a stressful situation. When you're in a stressful situation, you don't know what's going to happen. You're like, oh my God, and you're anticipating, you're antsy. And that's not good, because if you're in a fight, if you're in a tactical law enforcement standoff, if you're in a speech even, you not being ready and antsy is not going to help you. So that's a tourist, because I'm trying to get there. So if I go to a foreign land that I've never been to, let's say I go to Egypt. I usually use Paris, so I'm going to change it up. Let's say I go to Egypt, I see the Sphinx, I see the Great Pyramid. Most people, what are they going to do? They'll pull out their phone, take a million selfies in front of the Sphinx, picking its nose, doing something stupid, right?
Right.
So that's the thing that is irrelevant to life. But obviously, I'm not saying if you're on a tour, don't have fun. That's what I'm saying, obviously. But it's like in a fight or flight situation, a stressful situation, that's going to, oh my God, what's this? It's never going to end good for you. I can guarantee you that. It may not like stop you from winning or stop you from succeeding, but it will never help you. So that's the tourist. He or she is ready to see the site, take a bunch of pictures, get excited of new sites. But the resident, guess what? If I live in Egypt and I live by the Giza pyramids, or I live by the Sphinx or in that area, I've seen that thing 100 times. I use myself as an example. I live in South Florida, sunny South Florida by the beach, not too far from Miami. I don't care where you're from in the world, people have heard of Miami. Like, I live in a smaller city called Deerfield Beach, which is about 45 minutes north of Miami Beach. But I'm relatively close, and the beaches where I live are great too, just not as famous. And it's like, I see the beach every single day. I drive by every single day. I never go to the beach. People are like, you're crazy. I couldn't live that close to the beach. I'll be there every day. You know why I don't care? I'm used to it. I'm adapted to it.
Yes.
That's stress. So the resident, he or she's not going to be like, it's the beach. Let's go surfing. Let's go fishing. I'm like, I've been here for 31 years. I don't care. Like, for you, I don't know, how long have you lived in Australia?
Well, I was born here, but yeah, I've been here my whole life. I'm 29. So yeah, I'm very familiar with it. Yeah.
So yeah, you're not going to like lose your mind for things that's there, you know? I don't want to be cliche. I was about to say something cliche, but I stopped myself because I haven't been to Australia, but I know there's some great sites. I know there's that opera house
the Sydney
Opera House, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so I know that. But it's like, you're not going to freak out because you've probably seen it. Like me, like people say, oh, you've been such and such place, but that's in my Florida history books. Like, we have to take Florida history in 5th grade in Florida. So it's like we learn and hear about all these things, see these things, we go on field trips, things people dream about going to in books. And like, I live right down the street from there, you know? So I'm the resident. I don't get freaked out. So you always want to be a resident. And you don't automatically become a resident. That happens over time. Whether you move there or you're born there, over time, you know, you didn't realize when you were 6 that you live in a very like unique place. Like, Australia is one of those places that is a destination. Like, if you go to book a ticket for a plane, it's probably going to be a competitive price, you know? Like, if I say, let's go to like a random place in Nebraska, in America, it's going to cost like nothing because no one wants to go there. If I try to go to Sydney or something like that, or Melbourne, I'm probably going to have to pay a decent price. So for someone like us, we get to acclimate to that. So that's what the tourist or the resident. You want to be the resident, not the tourist, because the tourist is not sure what they're going to see. They're going to be more anticipating, more anxiety. And that's not a bad thing, but you have to go, just like with a vacation. The more I go to this place, you become the resident slightly. You know, you might not live there, but if you go there again with a person who's never been there, you're going to be the one like, hey, I know just where to go to eat, or I know just where to stay in a hotel, because now you're more familiar with it. So the tourist resident is one of my favorite analogies that I use. That's cool that you knew about that one.
No, I love it. I mean, when I first heard you say it, it really stuck with me, and I was able to really like, and yeah, plus it was just an awesome analogy. So yeah, kudos to you. Now, fast forwarding on, I suppose, can you talk about your own company, Mind Body One? How long, I suppose, has this been up and running? And I suppose who are you currently working with? Because, I mean, we have touched on it, just some of our answers before, that, you know, you kind of work with a real mix of clientele, like from the elite athletes, but also you work with the general population and the corporates too. So, I suppose, can you talk about, first off, Mind Body One, but also the transition as well? Because if I'm not mistaken, you were kind of doing sort of general fitness and things before you sort of started your own thing. That's correct?
Yeah. I'm by the one is a very interesting transition. Like, I guess it's the beauty of a podcast, so I'll tell the story. Because usually when people ask me, I try to condense it, but since we're on a podcast, you're going to get the story.
Yeah.
So in 2014, so I'm a backtrack. You said fast forward, I'm backtrack a little bit. So 2014, I had a daughter. Her name's Tiana. Her birthday is actually tomorrow. She'll be 6 years old.
Oh, happy birthday to her.
So she was born June. Yeah, thank you. So June 12th, 2014, she was born. So when I was with her mother, we're not together anymore, but being the hustler that I am, I was doing an internship as a strength coach with Florida Atlantic football. Well, I work with soccer too, but mostly football. I was doing a part-time job at a mental health hospital dealing with psychiatric ward, meaning like people with severe disorders, like severe, like attacking me type. I've been attacked by a 70-year-old woman, got punched in the face and slapped by a 70-year-old woman, that type of crazy, right? But I don't even say crazy. I apologize, got PC.
Yeah.
But
sure.
So I was doing that, and then when she was born, it was like, okay, I was doing fitness on the side. I had a few clients, nothing extreme. It was a decent side gig. It was like a few thousand a month. It's something I couldn't live off, but it was like maybe 1,500. So it was a decent little side gig. And what happened when she was born, I was kind of like, I need something stable. So I became a teacher. Now you're like, wait, what else are you doing? Like, so I was teaching, finishing my master's, doing the overnight job with the psychiatric hospital and the internship, and that eventually finished. So then I was just teaching at one point. So I got laid off from that job within 4 months of the semester, not even 3 months of the semester. And I had a newborn baby, a significant other, a house, a car, the whole nine. And I'm like, wow, what do I do with my life? I just lost everything. And that's why Mr. Mental Muscle is more than just a name for me. This is my life. So being a man that I am, my ex was like heartbroken because she's like, how are we going to do it? I'm like, don't worry, I'm not a quitter. So I said, but to her, I said that. In my head, I'm like, what am I going to do? I don't know. But I had to figure it out quick. So my little brother worked at Target. So he was working at Target as a cashier. I have a master's degree or finishing it. And not saying I'm above that work, but it's kind of like, this is really backtracking. So I take the job at Target, unloading trucks and loading them and taking the boxes open and putting toys on the shelf. Toy aisle is the biggest aisle in Target. The second biggest is sporting goods, and the third biggest is furniture. And I worked all three of those aisles. But my main aisle was toys. I was unloading trucks, big boxes, ripping them apart with a knife, and putting toys on the aisle. So while this was happening, I was searching for teaching jobs. And talk about mental toughness, why Mr. Mental Muscle is really my life. I got rejected 57 times. I applied for 57 jobs from November to May. I got rejected after rejected after rejected after rejected. And mostly because they said experience, because I was only 26 at the time. So I'm like, how I'm going to live? Like, I can't live off of working part-time at a retail store, So while that was happening, I had my earphones in because it was overnight. It was like from 2 a.m. to 9 a.m. So I would listen to ebooks on cognitive science, psychology, motivation theories, personality theories, podcasts, all kinds of stuff, just filling up my brain with everything I could learn. And then eventually I said, you know what? I don't know if I can be here any longer, because at some point I was just getting complacent. I'm like, where can I go from here? I didn't get any teaching jobs. So one day I just didn't go in. I feel bad about it, but at the same time I don't, because it's a corporation, they'll be okay. I just didn't go because I'm like, I can't be doing this. So I saw an ad on Craigslist maybe a week after that. So when I saw this ad, you're probably like, where's he going with this? I'm getting to the point.
No,
So I see an ad on Craigslist, and it says Neurofeedback technician. And I'm like, what the hell is that? But I see the word neuro. It says psychology majors wanted. So I'm like, okay, I'm a psychology major. Seems interesting. I text them. They call me back, set up an interview. I go in, take my resume. They're like, you have a master's degree. This is below your pay grade. And I'm thinking, like, how much is it? They're like, $10 an hour. And I'm like, it is. So I went from making $40,000 teaching to $11 unloading trucks and stacking toys on the shelf to $10 putting EEG headsets on people's heads in an addiction center. So I took the job. So I did it 25 hours a week. So it wasn't full time. And I was the assistant to this guy. He was a psychologist named Dr. Rick Harris. He's one of the leaders in neurofeedback, which is basically an EEG headset. For those who don't know, that's basically like a heart rate monitor for the brain, for those out there that don't know. So it reads your brain waves. What happens is the patient sits in the chair, watches a movie, a regular movie like, say, Avengers or whatever, and as they're watching it, their own brain waves send out a signal of if they're in a calm state, and it shows these waves going up and down, agitated state, relaxed, sleepy, whatever. And our goal is to help rewire their brains so they're in a more consistent state. And these are drug addicts, so in recovery, so their brains are all over the place.
Of course.
But over time, research has shown, and I've seen this with my own eyes, it actually reframes the brain. So this is more like applied physiological, like neuroscience. But I learned all this stuff. And he only had 2 centers at the time, and I was his assistant. So basically what I would do as his assistant, I got a lot of responsibilities that I was just thrust into. So I would take their intake, doing personality assessments. I would do their EEG assessments. I would do their ADHD assessments. So I was doing a lot of cognitive testing, psychometrics, if you will. And a lot of people notice about my background. So I spent 3 years doing that. So I had a lot of experience working hands-on with people with severe or high brain dysfunction. And I got to see this firsthand. And then this is where mind body comes in. So you're like, okay, he's getting to it now. So one day, Dr. Harris comes to me. He knows I have a background in exercise science. He knows I have a background in sports psychology. I'm instrumental muscle at this point for 2 years now. It's 4 years, so 2015. So he's like, I want you to make a program. We're going to call it the mind-body connection. So not mind-body one yet, the mind-body connection. And I want to have workouts. I want to have thinking. I want to have like mental toughness, mental skills lectures. I'm like, I'm your guy. So I write like a 2-3 page little proposal, nothing serious. I give it to him. He's like, this is great. Sends it up to because he's the owner and the operator and the doctor, the psychologist, whatever, but he has a board. So he takes it to the board and they love it too. I'm like, it's my time to shine. But this is where perseverance and patience comes in. They get audited by insurance company because with addiction centers, they're very stringent on how they run them because there's a lot of shady people in that industry. So they get audited. So they have to get things ready. So they put the mind-body connection group on the back burner. So this is a whole year goes by, a whole 365. I don't say anything. I'm still working there, making $10 an hour. My now ex, I'm still with her at the time. It's kind of frustrating because there's nothing against her. I have nothing against her. But it's frustrating to know that the man you love or care about, the father of your daughter, is struggling to make ends meet because he's following this, in maybe her eyes or their eyes, the world's eyes, a dream. Because in my mind, I'm building the framework for Mind Body One. Because even though I wasn't doing it in person, I was building what would later become, in theory, hundreds of pages of research, dozens of pages of written like ideas on Word documents that I would make up. And this was happening behind the scenes while I was doing regular fitness and doing my neurofeedback job. So she didn't really quite see it, and that's why we kind of didn't work. But basically, a year later, we broke up. I'm like on my last dollar. Like a lot of people, so I think I've never really talked about it. I've been on a few podcasts, and you might be the first one. If not, you're probably the second, but I don't think I've said it many times. But I was actually living in my warehouse facility, or my facility. I had it was like an office type hybrid. And I was living there, and I was taking showers at UFit gym. Like I had a $10 membership where I would just go to the gym, shower, and go back. And I had a little stove top. I would cook food, and I would walk across the Publix. And I lived like that for about 6 months because in my head, I'm like paying for an apartment or whatever versus funding my dream, doing my passion. And I got to the point that I had no money. And I told Dr. Harris, I'm like, hey, you're like a mentor to me. Can we do something? And this is not me saying, can I have $100,000 or nothing like that. This is me saying, can we get that group going? And it's been a year now. So he was like, well, okay. So I'm like, yes. So we meet up. No, he calls me the next day. And he's like, how does $50 an hour sound? Mind you, I'm only doing this group like 3 or 4 times a week. So if you do the math, I'm getting paid the exact same amount. I'm doing less work though. I'm like, that didn't make sense to me, but I'm a nice guy and I'm very agreeable. And I said, yes. So I consulted with a friend. They told me, nah, man, can't do that. So I had to suck it up And I came back to him and said, nah, Dr. Harris, I love you. You're a mentor to me, but I have a lot on my plate. I have a daughter. I have a lot going on. So I told him, can we do something else to make this make more sense for me? So he thought about it. He said, you know what? And this is how it shows he cared about me. He wasn't just trying to pawn me off. Because at first I was like, is this guy just trying to pawn me off? But this showed me he cared.
Sure.
He knew I had a master, so he's like, you have a master. So we can run the group as a clinician because I had the credentials for it. So it's not like we're finagling the system. I had the credentials. So I'm like, I didn't know that because I didn't know how the billing system works with addiction centers.
Yeah.
So basically, he built it as a group so I could get paid as a clinician. And since I had the credentials, I could sign off and it was legit, did my thing. I got a pretty decent salary and I was doing what I love. And that was the beginning of Mind Body One, that Mind Body Connection group. So I would do 30 minutes of like a mental skill lecture on self-talk, visualization, goal setting, whatever. And then I would make these crazy games where you had to react to different numbers and colors and questions and run to the cone or flip a card. And you may be like, that sounds kind of, so it's like, that sounds kind of familiar. That was the birth of Mind Body One. So that was 2016. So for a year, I ran that group. It was great. I was making decent money. I was starting to teach at the college because I teach part-time now at a college. So things are picking up for me. But guess what? Adversity comes and goes. It's not a distant relative. They like to visit. So it came back, and they actually had some mergers with the other centers because he went from 2 centers to like 5.
Yeah.
And then I think he started merging them, and then I was still around. So there's massive layoffs going on. But I was still there. And I'm thinking like, oh, my God. It's going to be my number eventually because I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. These are things they have to have. I'm a service that's great and people love it. People love my group, but I'm very expendable. So I made it about a year and I didn't get cut. But one day I knew it because I saw him like, this is like an hour before my group. He said, hey, I'm going to have to let you go. And I said, thank you, Dr. Harris. I didn't get mad. I'm like, thank you. Because without there's a lot of factors go to my story. Part of it. And I actually skipped one of the most important ones. I'm going to backtrack one more time. My great-grandmother died of Alzheimer's during this period when I got the gig. So that also fueled me too because now it's like I lost a dear person to brain disease. I'm working with brain disease and illness and mental illness. Yeah, so that all fueled it. So when he let me go, that's when the Mind Body One officially became something because now I'm like, you know what? I'm on my own now. But I gathered so much research, so much experience in the real world. I feel like I can't be touched on. Let's make this a real business. So I made Mind Body One with the premise of the same thing I did with the Addiction Center. And that's how I got started with the fitness groups that will be a mixture of mental drills with regular workouts. And I guess I can stop there with that question because everything you see now is from that. So I know that was a long story, but
no, that's fascinating. Well,
that's kind of how Mind Body One came to be.
Yeah, I mean, I actually didn't even know a lot of that stuff into some of your background, some of the things you've done in the past, and you're obviously a true testament to your resilience as well, pushing through. And so, yeah, no, that's really interesting. Now, in terms of, I guess, look, obviously we've got it all up and running now. Can I suppose you talk about also some of the equipment and things that you use, such as like the fit lights and so. Was that things and stuff that you actually put together yourself, or was some of this equipment or the things was always out there, or was it just sort of like underutilized?
I'd say it's 50-50. So fit lights, I definitely have to give a testament to them because they've been very integral in my career. I actually posted this on Instagram right before I call. But I love those guys. They brought me in as a brand ambassador. I was the first one. Now they have like 4 or 5 now, but I was the first one because they saw that I was using it in a unique way. So I didn't create fit lights, and a lot of people think I did. So they'll be like, "Hey, I see your tool being used," and I'm like, "Well, I use it, but I'm not a creator." So a lot of people make me synonymous with it, which I don't mind because I am a partner or team member of their program and their company. But I did not create fit light. But what I did do was create a methodology that is unique to me. So that's where I can say I'm like say the hardware, like Apple's the hardware and Windows is the software. So I'm Windows in a sense, I guess you could say, with them. But I do have my own equipment that I do make. So if you ever see the little sticks I use or the grids, I make those myself. I print those out. And those are things that I personally created myself. Like the concentration stick is an invention I created that existed for me. The grids, I didn't create concentration grids, but I made my own variation of them. So pretty much those things are things I did create. So like half of the stuff I use is from me, and the other half is things that I purchased. Like there's FitLight. There's another one called Vector Ball. So if you ever see me, like I use these with Dustin a lot. It's actually a baseball that lights up on impact. So when it hits something, it turns red, green, or blue. Shouts out to John Lindsay. He's actually the creator of that, and he's actually an ex-military guy whose son plays baseball, and that's why he created it. And me and him became good friends. We've traveled together, went to different colleges doing presentations and stuff. So he's a real great guy, and his product is amazing. And so I use things like that, and I'm very big on using things I believe in. Like there's a lot of people come to me and they see who I work with, or they see my following is pretty decent, and I'm not big on just saying. I want to actually be like, this is something I want, because unless you're like, say, LeBron James or something, there's nothing you're really going to offer to make me just be like, throw my morals out the window, you know? I'm just going to use this. Like, I'm sure LeBron James doesn't drink Pepsi or Coke or whatever every day, but you see him on a Sprite commercial or whatever.
Yeah. No.
So I'm not at that level. So, and even if it was, depending on what it is, I still would question it. But for the most part, there's all the products you see me use, I'm heavily using with my real clients. So it's not just like, here's the post, me doing this drill, and you never see it again. These are things I'm using consistently. So Eye on the Ball, that's the Vector Ball, FitLight, and I use the Hiko stick as well. So those are probably three things I use consistently that aren't mine, and everything else is mine, because some things not even like tools. Some things are just methodologies. Like I've created like actual formats that are based off cognitive science and psychology that I said, let me take this real life scientific brain science fact and term and make a drill out of it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how my brain works. Like it's not a tangible thing. I'm like, why not? Let's make it tangible.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that's actually something I was going to ask you about. But yeah, it's mentioned the FitLight. So one of my previous guests, I suppose you would know, because he's done a bit of work with me, be Jason Stacy, and he I know he's a very big fan of using the FitLight. Tennis players. And he one of the things he said to me after I interviewed him is, you've got to get Nick on, to obviously talk about some of his work and so a massive shout out to him.
Oh, Jason, most definitely, he's amazing. Did he tell you how we met?
No, he actually didn't. But I'd love to hear the story.
This is a pretty cool story, at least for me. Like, he hit me up. I was in Stewart at Phil DeRue's old facility, because I used to do a lot of work up there. It's about an hour away from where I live, because Phil is about an hour north. But now he comes down here a lot where I live, because now our new facility is here. But basically, that Phil's facility, I'm in Miami. I want to buy your kit, starter pack, the things I was just talking about. I'm like, oh, cool. He said, can you mail it to the hotel? And I'm like, oh, where you at? He's like, I'm in Miami. I'm like, oh, that's like 30, 45 minutes away. I could just drive to you. But I didn't realize he was at the Miami Open with Aryna Sabalenka, the number, I think, 9 women's tennis player in the world. And at the time, I had no idea what it was, because I didn't follow tennis at all. So he hits me up and says, well, come on by. I'll leave some tickets for you. I'm like, really? And I'm like, okay, I'm there. So I drive down to Hard Rock Stadium, which is about, like, say, 25, 30 minutes. I meet up with him. I meet Aryna. I meet her coach. I meet Djokovic, Novak. Yep. I meet Serena and Venus Williams. Like, I'm meeting all these big-time tennis stars. And, like, 3 hours ago, I had no idea who half of them were. And not to sound funny, but that happens a lot. Like, I find myself in, like, I almost saw lucky or blessed, whatever you want to call it. I find myself in a lot of situations where it's like, why am I here? Like, this is not my world, but that's the beauty of Mind Body One has done for me. Jason welcomed me with open arms. He brought my system so much love on that, supporting me financially, and then also adapting it and using it. So we did our practice, her practice warm-ups on one of the practice courts. And she did her tennis stuff. And after we did my cognitive conditioning stuff, and we have a big crowd gathering around. You see me holding up sticks, doing the grid, holding up the grid, all my stuff. Like, and people looking like, who's this guy? Like, it's like, what's he doing here? Doing these colors and numbers and running and jumping. It was just a surreal feeling to be in the middle of the Mayo with the best athletes in the world of tennis. In the world of tennis, like, eyes on me, and like Jason made that happen. So like I said, that guy's amazing. He really believes in what I'm doing, and that means a lot. And I appreciate him linking us together, because that's what this is about. Because my biggest hurdle as a business is not necessarily, like, I would say, getting sales or getting clientele. It's clientele or potential clientele understanding what this is. And I need people who believe and to share it. And that's what he's been doing an amazing job. He shares me all the time, and it's much appreciated.
Yeah, no, here. Now, in terms of, I suppose, talking more back into cognitive performance, I guess for the average guy, a lot of people would think that it's something that's not very tangible, which I know you're going to disagree with me and tell me, which and the audience. A lot of people would think, the average guy would think they see physical training, that there's all this data, there's things you can use to obviously see your progress, but cognitive training, I think some people would probably say or would believe that it's not something you can really measure. Can I suppose you talk about the ways, the way why it is tangible, and I suppose what are the things that you're looking for?
So what if I told you I did disagree with you and I do agree with you? What would you say?
Okay, well, that's a curveball.
So I'll say I kind of agree with you because I say this myself all the time to clients and potential clients. I can see someone's bicep getting bigger, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can see one run faster at times. Like, yes, we can measure cognitive processes, and this is where I agree with you because we can measure them, but the biggest question you got to ask with any kind of brain or mental health or mental skill is, what does that measurement say? Because I've done research or assisted with research too, and when we do research, we got to have tangible constructs or measurable constructs that make sense, not just for the sake of the context of the experiment, but that can be generalized, because most of the biggest faults of researchers is their stuff can't be seen in the real world. Because if I make a setup, so let's use myself for example. I have a drill where I have a fit light set up, one on each side, about 2 feet apart, and in the middle there's an iPad screen. And on the iPad screen, they're doing something called a concentration grid, where you have to poke the numbers in numerical order, 1, 2, 3, 4, but all scrambled up. And on the side, peripherally, the eyes are forward doing the grid, peripherally, about 2 feet away, one of those 2 lights will light up every few seconds, and they have to react and put it out. Now, I could say this is a perfect drill for multitasking and peripheral vision, which it is.
Yes.
But can I take that and say, if you do well at that drill, you'll be a better fighter? Can I say that? No, I can't. And that's why I check my biases and comfort zones, because a lot of people won't say that because they'll be like, this is because they got a market. And that's why I think I messed up, because I'm a straight shooter. But that's why I agree with you, because while I can't measure that, I personally myself would never say that's going to make me a better fighter. But I will tell you is I can measure the fact that you're able to lock in on a target for 30 seconds or a minute, nonstop, focus on it. When you're presented with an external stimulus outside of your center of view, you can react to it in 0.6 seconds or whatever. So I can tell you that. And where it carries over to a real sport or real life is really subjective to the person, because obviously you can do amazing on that drill and get knocked the hell out.
Yeah.
And you can do horrible on that drill and do amazing, and vice versa. Now, with more data collection, I've done a lot of numbers, and I do see a correlation with people who do well at some of my drills, not all, but some of them, and do, because I actually took the time to go through some of the fighters I work with and look at their records after working with me and their significant strikes. And I use it with a grain of salt because, like I said, I can't say controls that. But I did see a small correlation with some of it because there is relevance. I can never say that it isn't relevant. So that's why I disagree with you. I agree with you, but disagree with that statement because it is relevant. So it's like half of it is like it's only going to measure what you want it to measure. But the other half is it has relevance to what you're trying to do, which is have someone be able to perceive these different stressors, be able to react to different stimuli, and make the decisions as quickly as possible under pressure.
Yeah, sure. Now, in terms of the actual, I think it's for people to understand, in terms of this whole quote, they need for my audience that you actually blend this a lot in with the physical training too, which you kind of just said. Can you, I suppose, talk about how you would sort of structure this like in a workout? We used Dustin Poirier as a good example, and we also talked previously about, you working with Phil Theroux. But yeah, so can you talk about how would you sort of structure this this sort of training in, I guess, like a training session? Let's use Dustin, for example, a fighter. How would this go in a program for him?
So more so in the past, we're not doing as much. This camp's kind of been crazy because of COVID-19 and everything, so it's kind of been harder. But in the past camps, how we do some days, it'll depend. But Phil runs the strength conditioning, so I work with him on that. So, for example, a day where we integrate it, we'll do something like, say, a 90-second duration of some kind of physical bout. That could be a prowler push, med ball tosses, something that's going to last about a minute and a half of physical exertion. And then we'll immediately bring them over to me with some kind of cognitive drill, whether it's the color box and the grid or the fit light reaction or something that's going to make them have to have a usually a high working memory load. So working memory is basically the ability to hold information and figure things out while holding. So if I was to say a simple math problem like 48 plus 12, you probably see in your head 8 plus 2, 0. 4 plus 1 carry the 1, and you'll get 60. So that's how, like a simple example. Another example would be like remembering a phone number. I said my number is 954-226-2926. You probably would say it in your head over and over again until you can write it down and put it in your phone. So that's working memory, holding information for later usage. So why I would do that type of drill while he's under a high heart rate, elevated heart rate after 90 seconds of duration is because if I just make him do a reaction drill, that's not too much thinking. It's just basically see a light, put it out. So see a light, put it out. But during that 30 seconds of my drill, I'm going to say 6 numbers out loud. And after that, you got to recall them in order. Now using that working memory because now I'm reacting. Where's the react? Where's the light? I'm huffing and puffing, breathing hard. And then 7. Wait, what? 3. And now they're freaking out. And they're like, okay, what are those numbers in order? Not just what are those numbers. What are those numbers? And 7, 4, 2, 5, 4. Good job. That's correct. Or nope, you missed one. Or nope, that's out of order. Or you're all wrong. And now you're like, what? I know I got it. And now they're getting frustrated. That's good because you're going to get frustrated. So we like to put the physical, that's one way. We let the physical and immediately integrate a mental skill. Or we'll just do a full workout and he's just done. And then just have him do it in the already depleted state, but he's come down the baseline at least. So we'll do it like that too. So that's typically how we usually do. We either integrate it between sets of like a moderate intensity anaerobic workout for about 60 to 90 seconds, and then quickly throw them in a 30-second bout as like an active rest, and then he'll do that, or in a whole new session. Now, sometimes I personally integrate the physical with the thinking too, though. So I'll do something like have a iPad screen with something I call fit arithmetic. That's one of my methodologies I created. It's basically like taking the concept of just adding numbers and just working memory once again. It'll be like 4 plus 5. That's 9. But around that equation, there's a red box, a green box, a blue box, and a yellow box. And each box has a number in it. So if the answer is 9, let's say yellow has 9 in it, you'll shuffle to the yellow cone and get back center. The next equation, 2 plus 2, that's 4. Let's say green is the 4. 4 is in the green box. Shuffle over to green. So now you're using that thinking processing while also having to move based on that. And I call that Aerostatic Conditioning because I took that from the word Aristotle, the famous Greek philosopher, who was actually known for doing his lectures in something called the Lyceum. That was his school. And he would walk and give lectures. So I took that concept and was like, you know what? I'm going to Aerostatic Conditioning because we're literally doing the same thing. We're making them think, process, while act and move at the same time. So I do stuff like that too, where the drill in itself is integrated with the thinking. Because some of them will just be stationary. You see a lot of those more so with like Dustin and my bigger athletes. But some of like my younger, like my high school guys, I'll do a lot when they have to move and process too.
Yeah. No, that's really fascinating stuff. It's actually, I did listen to a previous podcast, and you actually spoke about, I think it was actually the one that, like you said, the one that really blew up, Mr. Mental Muscle, and that was it was Dustin Poirier's fight with Anthony Pettis. I think this is a good example of which one you used of some of this work, and it was, I believe he was having his eye sort of covered or his vision sort of impaired and having to use sticks. I like this would be it's probably like a really good example of some of these drills you've used. Can you, I suppose, talk about what that drill was and how it really transferred into that fight that he actually had as well?
Yeah, that one with Pettis did take some damage to his eye. I forget which eye it was, but I had these things that were strobe goggles. Basically, you put them on, they're like glasses or shades that strap around your head, and imagine like every few seconds you're blinded and then it opens up. So you're seeing nothing, then you see something. See nothing, then you see something. And that's what the glasses are doing to you. So I can make them one eye, or the other eye, or both eyes. So what me and Phil did, this is like in the early days of when me and Phil collaborated. And like shouts out to Phil. I miss these days, man. If you're watching this and when you see this, but it was like we worked literally concurrently, and not concurrently, but integratedly, because it'll be like he was holding up a light and I was calling out numbers. Dustin was It was like the three amigos, and we still, trust me, we're still three amigos, but it's just like we've all grown in our own respective fields. Dustin becoming a champ, Phil is becoming like the mother freaking world leader in strength conditioning and MMA, and me trying to do my thing with my cognitive conditioning stuff. So it's like we have him doing those things, and Phil would throw like combinations with noodles. He had to counter them and block them, and he's only having one eye available. So once again, going back to that tourist or resident analogy, because that's the same podcast I use that.
Yeah.
And it's like, although I can't simulate his eye being shut or poked or whatever, I simulated his eye being accessible, meaning his brain is taking a trip to that site. His brain taking a trip to the city of eye poke or the city of eye shut, whatever it is, because now he's somewhat acclimated to it. So it's not like, oh my gosh, the first time I've seen this, where am I? It's like, oh, I remember this place.
Yeah.
I don't like it here, but what are you gonna do? So yeah, that was a big part of that first fight.
No, it's not great stuff. Now, I suppose talking more into your work, you've obviously, like you said, you've worked in a number of sports and fields. What would you say is the biggest area that they lack in cognitive training?
I hate to be that guy, but there's a lot of things I can say. But I'm gonna say the lack, in my personal opinion, I feel like it's become gimmicky, because I can get how I can get thrown in with those guys. It is what it is. I take it. I get it. But I know personally I'm not, but I can see why I get thrown in, because there's a lot of people who imitate what they see. And not to sound like conceited or nothing, I'm very big on creating my own methodology or taking my methodology from the literature and making sense of it in an applied fashion. And a lot of guys aren't doing that. It's kind of like, what can I do to make you the most like overwhelmed in 30 seconds? Like, there's pages that will share videos of like crazy stunts that are impressive, don't get me wrong, but I actually have a chart somewhere in here in this office, and it shows the 8 things I say do's and don'ts of cognitive conditioning. And one of it is cool drill does not equal effective drill, because a lot of times it looks cool for the gram. And my thing is, you can probably agree with this, you don't have to, but a lot of my drills don't look that cool. I got some that look, whoa, shoot, that was amazing. But I got a few that I know that I post that people are like, okay. But in actuality, I know the rationale for them, so I don't care. Like, I have one drill, I have a boxer named Maureen Shea, and shouts out to her. She's a world champion. I don't know if you heard of her. She actually has a movie she worked on, $1 Million Baby, that's like kind of loosely based on her life, like her struggle. So I had a drill she was doing. She was sitting on a stability ball, one leg up, breathing at the pace of the screen. So I made this video. It's called Mindful Stroop. So the Stroop effect is when the color of the word doesn't match the ink. So say the word red is written in blue ink. Your brain wants to read red, but you got to say blue. So she was doing that. So she's sitting, and the screen's telling her when to breathe, inhale on a count. It's like 5 bars. And as they fill up, you inhale, and when they disappear, you exhale. Looks very boring on the screen. Like, if you're looking at it, you're like, okay. But people don't understand that's an important thing, because getting her to control her mood states, her mindfulness, her breathing, while still factoring different things. And I know a lot of people that doesn't stimulate them, because we're in an age of quick gratification. And that's not it. So that's one of the biggest gripes I got with this industry is there's a lot of guys, or people, I should say, that are not doing it with the intent. I'm not saying they're doing it on purpose either. I'm sure most of them just love it. It's fun. But I personally take slight offense to that, because it's kind of like saying, if you're a strength coach or athletic coach and you do this stuff, be mindful of that. You're doing it as an extension of what you really do. Now, me, this is all I do. Like, I do not train athletes for strength and conditioning. I do not train athletes for sport performance anymore. So when you do that, you got to take into account that if you're just trying to add something on for some spice, that's fine. But don't make it to the point that you got to come up with some stuff just to outdo your last post, because now there's no consistency in the drill. How do you get standardized scores when it's a different drill every time? Or there's no measurable way, because if I throw a ball off a roof, do a backflip and catch it between my legs, that looks, I'm sure if I could do that, I would get 1 million views. But what's the outcome of that? Well, how do I measure the efficiency of it? Now, you might figure it out, but I personally don't see it. So that's why I think the biggest industry in my eyes is that they got to, like, people, not all, because obviously I see a lot of people do a great job of that too, of like how I do it, do my due diligence. But I hate to say it, it's way more of those other guys than guys like us. And that's in the industry though, sadly. But I think it hurts us more because we're not established yet. So I get DMs all the time. Look at this drill, man, made me think of you. And it's some total BS. And I'm not a jerk or an asshole, so I'll be like, oh, thanks. Knowing in my head, I'm like, I cringe when I see it. But I only thought of me because they saw it, or they saw thinking, or they saw something similar. Now, I actually appreciate it because that means they're thinking about me. But deep down, I'm like, these are the ones I'm talking. So
Yeah, I know what you mean. I get that in field and sort of fitness and strength conditioning as well, where you just get DM'd by someone about you and think, oh, this is a really cool exercise, or this will work, and it's just like, nah. So no, that's a good point. Now, in terms of I guess some of your current work, I guess talking about now, and what are sort of the things you suppose you're currently working on now, and have you got any sort of future work lined up as well?
That's a great question because I'm always working on something. But to give a more finite answer, I finished a webinar yesterday that I did for free. It's called Worrier or Warrior, and it went pretty well. So I think I'm gonna start doing like a repeat that. So I know there's a lot of people that signed up. Like, I think 30 people signed up, and I know some people who didn't get to see it. So I might do like a schedule, like, okay, every other week, and it's like a rotation. So I did Warrior this week. In 2 weeks I'll do the Art of Camp, and I'll come. It's like a coming attraction now coming. So that's one thing I'm gonna have going is more webinars, teaching mental skills. I'll do some teaching more of the applied stuff. I'm actually working on one, probably posted after we get off this call, that it's actually pretty much ready to go. I'm gonna release it probably the end of the month. That'll teach. It's called Get Your Mind Right, and basically teaching frameworks that, okay, I see what you post, I like it. How do I do that with my clients? And it gives you like, I'll give you like key. It's not nothing too deep, but if you're working with this population, do this, or how I make my measures, this is how I go about my parameters. Because I get DMs all the time about that. And depending if I have time, I try to be like as friendly and open as I can. But obviously, I got many things going on, so I can't get to everyone. But if the timing's right, I sometimes hop on a call with a person across the world just like this who are asking about, hey, I got a client, I do this with them, what should I do? And if I have time, I will do it. Like, I'm not at the point where I got 1 million followers and you're texting my marketing manager, you know, you're getting me. So I ain't on that level yet. But even if I do get that level, say I got control of mine. I wouldn't give them full control. Because I know a lot like celebrities, they have that and they're like messaging like their cousin or something who's holding it down. But so those two things, getting the courses, I'm not the courses, but the webinars up. And the one other thing I'm working on is actually a tribute to my grandfather. So I mentioned my dad was a police, or is a police, but the crazy thing is his father is actually a victim of police brutality. His father was killed by the police in 1968. This is 20 years before I was even born, but he was 9. My dad was 9 years old when this happened. And it's like his dad being a victim of police brutality, then becoming police and doing for his community, and like say now doing what I'm doing, like say, not sound cliche, but I feel like I was meant to do this. So I'm working on that project right now. I've been on and off with that about 4 years now. So I feel like the time of unrest in America right now, with buildings being burnt down, people are sick of the craziness. Like I said, I can see different perspectives on this. I can see the law enforcement perspective, obviously. So my dad had this life, but I can see the minority perspective as a black man in America, and it's like I get both sides. I've been in handcuffs. I've actually been to jail. Like, you're getting a lot of premieres. I've never talked about that either. And that was a stupid college fight. It was a fight I got into college. And it wasn't nothing crazy. I didn't do anything like insane. I got in a fight in college. I was with my friends. We beat I beat some guy up, I think. I was drunk, so that's not good. But basically, I spent a night in jail because of that. And I've been in other situations with the police that weren't that favorable. And it's like, I get it. But that's why I feel it's my place as a guy who's the son of a man who's a police, who's the grandson of a guy who was killed by police brutality. I have a program in his honor. His name is Johnny Davenport Jr. Johnny Davenport Jr. is my grandfather. My father is Frederick Davenport Sr. My older brother who you saw walking out when we started, that's Frederick Davenport II. So, like, he's a musician. But given my skill set, I've worked with law enforcement. I've worked with tactical pilot, like Navy SEALs. Like, I feel this is going to be my opus. This is going to be my piece de resistance. Like, that I can taste the spoon and be like, it's ready now. That's what I'm working on. That's probably going to be a changer because I feel my skill set is unique because outside of me just being the son of what I just told you, the fact is a lot of the psychology and cognitive stuff that's applied to these populations is very general because they do psych eval. Like, every police goes to a psych eval, but they're testing for like disorders like schizophrenia, bipolar, manic depressed, like things like that. But the thing is, I don't have to be mentally ill to be not mentally healthy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
Like mentally ill is have some kind of like disorder, but mentally health means am I functioning in an appropriate mindset? And a lot of people aren't. This is not even a police thing, but the fact is, you have that power, that jurisdiction that will influence the world in a lot of ways. Some negative, some positive, but the ones that are out now, and I'm not knocking those initiatives because they are making efforts. Because if one can learn, or a person can learn about their inner biases, like we all have biases, whether it be racial, whether it be sexual orientation, whether it be financial status, whether it be sport, everyone has that. The point is, can we get people familiar with these? Because if I said, I'm gonna ask you this question, you can say yes or no if you know. If you know, thumbs up for you, because not people. But have you heard of the availability heuristic?
No, I haven't.
So I'm gonna ask you a question. You ready? So I'm going to trivia mode, and this will make sense. You're like, this guy's asking me questions now, huh? So
Tables of eternity. Hang on.
What is the largest desert on Earth? Do you know the largest desert on Earth?
Largest desert. Isn't the
mine?
Not the Kalahari Desert? That's the first one that pops to mind.
Is that your answer? You want to go? Is that your answer, Kalahari?
Yeah.
So you're actually incorrect. You know what most people say? The Sahara. But that's incorrect too. You want to know the answer? You ready for this?
Yeah.
Antarctica.
What was it, sir?
Antarctica is the largest desert in the world.
Wow. Yeah.
But this, let me make my point. I'm gonna bring it back full circle. You ready? So the availability heuristic, what that means is we use our processing because the brain likes to limit resources to get to an answer. You heard desert. What do you probably think of? Heat, dry?
Yeah. So
the actual definition of desert is amount of rainfall per year. And Antarctica has the least amount of rainfall per year. And the North Pole has a second. And then it's the Sahara. So our brain says desert, hot, dry, sand. None of those things describe Antarctica, do it. Now, imagine that same bias, because we all have the availability heuristic amongst many biases that we deal with. Imagine that same bias with a guy with a gun. Or imagine that same bias with a guy who's supposed to dictate a job for an employee or a teacher.
Yeah.
That could be detrimental because now you're just using the available information that you have, in this case for a desert, hot, dry, sand, right? Mm-hmm. That's the available heuristic. I'll give you another one.
Yeah. I said, that was the first things that popped in my mind. Like straight away, I was thinking deserts, and I was like, Sahara.
That's the beauty of our brain. That's the beauty of our brain. It likes to fill in the blank, and that blank made more sense of a desert that you're more familiar with. And that's literally just a small snippet of what this curriculum will entail, because it's going to be for that kind of stuff, for biases, personality theories, which is also a background of mine. I didn't talk about that at all, but I have a large background in personality theories and psychology. The cognitive conditioning, where as far as the tactical stuff, like the shooting drills you see me do, all of that. So imagine sending an officer into his line of duty with that kind of knowledge. Because right now, they don't have any of that. And they barely have some of the psychological stuff. So I'm glad that's what I'm working on. That was a great question. That's what I'm working on.
Is that sort of stuff, because I know obviously, there's a lot of talk about, like defunding the police. That's something you hear a lot at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just sort of the stuff that you're wanting to obviously work on and sort of like push and encourage those, the police. But it sounds like this could be used for anyone, really.
Well, the funding question, I hear that thrown around a lot, like you said, and it's like, I say they shouldn't necessarily defund, but they should put money toward things that will help with that, because there's a lot of, like I said, where's that money really going? Police don't make that much money, so it's going somewhere. So it must be going to higher ups in the chain of command. But the guys who are on the streets every day, they're being sent out there with, not saying bad, because there's some departments that have amazing training, but they're few and far between, because the budget is dictated by your region. Like I live in South Florida, where this is a heavily populated place in the country. So we have for the most part, decent measures of preparing an officer. But what about that guy lives in a town where there's only 700 people? He's not trained for this stuff. And their budget can't do it. So some of that money should be allocated, I think, personally, in my biased opinion, towards something like what I'm creating. Like, I know that seems like a self-plug, but I'm being straightforward. It needs to be on stuff like that, because that's how you get a police more prepared. Because when you say someone pulls out their gun and shoots first and asks questions later, that's going back to being the tourist, right? That police was the tourist. He's pulling out his gun because he doesn't know what to do. Where is he? What to do? That's the easiest thing. If I'm unfamiliar, what's the easiest thing I can do right now? Pull out my gun, because I know that's the only thing I know that can stop this. I don't know if me trying to talk to him will stop it. I don't know if me trying to whistle gets attention. But I know if I pull this out, it'll end it. And that's where that comes from. So the funding police, I feel like if they do defund it, the money needs to be allocated in resources that make sense. Because a lot of people hear that term and think it's like get rid of the police. While there is people who are pushing for that too.
Yeah.
But I feel like people who understand it get that it means putting money where it'll benefit the society better. I just hope it's not just putting it in a place where it's like, let's not get to the source of the problem though. Because if you're going to take money away, it should go to a thing that's going to help the problem, or a problem, I should say.
Of course. Yeah, couldn't agree more on that. Now, I suppose some closing questions. One of them is, well, straight off, and I think we've really touched in this episode, and anyone when they listen, is that you're someone that has a lot of drive. Can I suppose you share what is it, I suppose, like how I suppose you have that sort of drive and what sort of motivates you? Because like you've touched on, you've faced a lot of adversity throughout your career, from college days to working to even right now. I would say you're still obviously in terms of persisting in that. Where I suppose can you tell our audience where it's come from?
That's a tough question because I feel like, crazy as it sounds, I've been like this since I was probably like 6, and I think it comes from a mixture of my father, because he's a very driven guy. He had his own business. Granted, it wasn't this stuff, but I did have an entrepreneurial spirit from an early age.
Yep.
I personally always been competitive, so I think that has a lot to do with it, because when I see a challenge, I don't ever think of it as, dang, I hope I can do it. I think of it as, what can I do, or what do I have to do to get through this? So I'm well aware I'm not Superman. So when I look at, you say drive, I think of it as like everything I do has a purpose. And I've been called many names for this growing up, and shoot, I've been called names for this now as an adult, because I don't see the world the same. Because, like, for example, social media. I've never had a personal social media strictly for person, because when I was a kid, like a young teenager, I had MySpace, and I used to make music. Me and my brothers used to rap, make beat, and we would sell CDs, stuff like that. And that's the first time I had like social media for that. But then it translated into fitness, and then that translated to My Body One. So since 2004. So 16 years of having a social media, from MySpace to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, Snapchat, it's always been for promoting a brand. So when you talk about how I look at the world, I don't really post for entertainment. Like, you've seen some of my posts, I do joke around, I make light of things, but it's always brand related. Even if it's a joke, I'll relate it to the brain somehow, or mental health. So it's like, it just comes with me that I don't like to use things unless they need to be done. And I don't know if that's a bit of hyper focus. I've been informally told I need to get checked for ADHD, and knowing my history, it kind of makes sense. Like, even if you like look at this podcast, I don't know if you know that I have not stopped moving the whole time, and that's just something I can't help. I'm always moving. I'm always thinking. My brain's always going, and that's a gift and a curse, because sometimes I overthink, but it's my superpower at the same time. So I think a little bit has to do with that too. I'm very hyper focused. I can literally sit in a place and zone out and do what I need to do for, like, I've done this before, like 28, 30 hours nonstop. I've done this. No drugs, no stimulant, no coffee, just get it done. I've done it. That's kind of like weird, I know, but it's like, so I think part of it is that too. Yeah. But my end goal, I guess, is the main factor, because the other reasons definitely, but my end goal is I want to contribute to the world what I've been fortunate enough, because everyone has a different upbringing. I don't know your upbringing, but I was fortunate enough to have both parents in the household, a father that set a very good example, a mother that's very loving and caring to this day as a grown man still. And that set the foundation. While I did have a lot of struggles as an adult, and I had my own set of tribulations as a child, like I failed numerous classes. Like, people assume I'm a straight A student. I've gotten good grades, yes, but I've gotten very bad grades too. And it wasn't for lack of trying. So I guess my deep down result is, like, I got to, like, do what I'm here for. Like, my goal is to, whatever talent I'm given, I got to make it happen. And I think that's why I keep driving the way I do, because I know I've been fortunate enough to be given opportunities and gifts that some may not have, or maybe different from others, that I need to showcase, and I feel I should share. And that keeps me going.
Yeah, no, great answer. Now, I was going into the strength conditioning side of it. Do you think it's very important that you have to find your niche, like you have, in a sort of sense?
Yeah, I would say yeah, because even in the psych and mental field, there's a lot of people, and I feel honored, because I'm like, because people, I know we're cool, we're being very simple, but a lot of people come at me like, and I'm not mad at it. It feels cool, but they come at me with this like presence of like I'm the go-to guy. And if anyone talks to me for like 5 minutes, I'm a very simple person. Like wear the same plain clothes every day. I have the same pair of shoes. So it's like when people come to me for like, what do you think? And they tell me what they're doing, it puts in perspective of how, once again, how fortunate I am that I'm doing what I'm doing and I was able to go through what I went through, because there'll be people who will tell me, do you charge your clients? And I'll be like, yeah. But I would understand why they asked that, because I remember 6-7 years ago when I talk about brain training or mental training, and then people are like, what? And then I say, hey, I'm going to charge you for this. And they're like, yeah, really? Never mind. I was there. So when they say that, it's kind of hard to say like, dang. There is people who haven't found it. So when we say niches, I tell them, I'm like, it sucks that it has to be like that, but you have to find the lane. And I was fortunate to find my the athletic realm. Those are kind of the three places where I find revenue. Like, obviously, Mind Body One's cool, but it got to do this because I have a daughter to feed. I got my own self to support. So when I talk to them, I always tell them, you got to kind of expand your market because, like you say, niche. Some people hear niche and get offended because they think it's like gimmicky. Niche doesn't mean gimmicky. Niche just means what is your specialization?
Yes.
And like I said at the beginning of the podcast, my specialization isn't necessarily just brain training. It's making you able to accommodate to less than adequate, stressful, high pressure situation, given whatever your demographic is. And I think I've done a good job of doing that because you see, I work with very diverse populations. Like in the course of a day, I can be with a sergeant of a police department. And in that same day, I could be working with 7-year-olds. Same day.
Yeah.
So it's like
more diverse than that.
So my niche is not a demographic. Yeah. So my niche is it's not demographic focused. My niche is more application focused. So that's why I try to tell people like, what is the end goal with the application? Because most people with my similar background, they can tell you the same like science of it, like what I know, because they know it too. But when I say things like tourists or there's no more saber-toothed tigers, that's me talking. Anyone can quote a book. So I think most people fail on that in strength conditioning, with acting, with cognitive training. They don't find where their niche is. And that doesn't mean, like, I used to take niche as an offense too, like they did. Because people were like, niche, like they think of gimmick. Like, no, niche just means, what do you specialize? What is your superpower? Like, this is a comic book character. Yeah. Superman can't, well, he can do a lot of things, but I'm trying to think. Superman can't shoot web out his shooters, whatever. He can't scale walls. Superman can't do, Batman can't see through buildings, right? But it doesn't make him not a superhero. So saying find your niche is not saying you're not able to be lucrative or a leader, because like Phil, for example, I'll use Phil. I quote him a lot because it's one of my best friends. I love him to death. Like a brother, like I said, we have a long history, and his niche is MMA. Now, is he limited to MMA? Hell no. He can work with NFL. He can work with tactical. He can work with kids, and he does. But when you go to that guy who's going to get that fighter in shape in the last 5 rounds, as his fighters do, or ours do, that's who you go to. And that's the same thing that people got to understand with their field. If you're that guy or girl that they call, what are they calling you for? That's what you got to ask yourself. Why are they calling you? A lot of people don't know that question. I didn't know that question probably up until 2 years ago, And you heard my story. My story is not 2 years old. My story is like 9 years old.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I'm saying? I only really figured that out 2 years ago.
That's fascinating. Yeah, great answer. Now, one of the final questions I got for you. I throw this curveball question in every episode, and so pretend you were the podcast host. What question would you ask yourself that I haven't asked you already? And of course, you need to answer it as well.
Let me see. I like that question because this is one of my favorite podcasts doing with you, because you've been very detailed. You spread around the questions. So I'm trying to think, because you asked a lot of diverse questions. I like that because a lot of people try to tend to stay towards sports stuff. And I love my sports history. You asked so many good questions. I'm trying to figure out something you haven't asked. I'm thinking I can find something. Okay, how about this? Where does this have application for just regular mental health? I don't think you asked that. Like I think I briefly said it, but I don't think you asked, and I didn't go too deep on it.
No, I didn't actually. Yeah.
So the answer to the question I just asked myself, where does all this come in with regular mental health? So a lot of people ask that a lot too, to me. That's why I brought it up. Because Non-athletes do not get this at all. Athletes can at least kind of connect some dots, but non-athletes are like, why? What does it have to do with me? So I always tell them mental health. So to get into the brain science just a tad bit, not too much. Let's say someone who has lingering thoughts that can become rumination or lead to depression. Like depression is basically the repetition of thoughts due to either chemical imbalance or traumatic events or a mixture of both, and at least 5 of 9 symptoms. So depression is not just having a bad day.
Yeah.
This bad day lasts for 2 months because you're not eating, you're not being socially interactive as you used to be, you lost weight, or you gained weight, you're not bathing, you're not brushing your teeth. You know what I mean? Because everyone gets depressed, but not everyone has depression. So where I come in, people ask, what does it have to do with that? If I go from the simple drills, like the simple reaction drills, stuff like that, if I use just that framework, you're teaching your brain to go into a fight or flight anxiety state of mind. Because that's what depression is. It's the brain misfiring or not sending enough of a certain neurochemical for you to cope. And now your brain physiologically is telling you to be sad. And then you think about things that make you sad, and it reconfirms the brain to say you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Because remember, the brain, not to oversimplify, it works on a checks and balances of getting closer to reward or further from danger. Like, that's the simplest way I could put it. There's more to it than that. So when you're in depressive state or anxiety, your brain's telling you you're getting further away from that reward and closer to danger or closer to threat. So when you do one of my drills, for example, like it's one of the red, yellow, green, blue, put them out in that order every time you see lights change order and color, it's simulating a position of the unknown. That's what depression is. It's worrying about things that haven't happened yet, or rephrase, that's what anxiety is, worrying about things that haven't happened yet. Depression is worrying about things that already happened. When you're doing my drills, none of that matters, because guess what? What's right in front of you? And that's what most people do in real life. So you say, what does that have to do with real life doing these little dumb drills? Well, you're once again simulating the same way, the fight or flight, because your brain, that's why I use the term, there's no more saber-tooth tigers, which will be a book I'm working on. So stay tuned for that, my first official book. And the premise is these ancient adaptations, when there was a saber-tooth tiger, still exist today. And when we're depressed or anxious or nervous, whatever it may be, these same physiological adaptations kick into gear. But the thing is, your brain only adapts to what you challenge it to. So when you make that a recurring theme, the brain's going to say, wait, this is the theme for depression or the theme for worry and doubt. Bring out everything that comes with it, physically, mentally, emotionally. And guess what happens? You further that agenda, and your brain's going to reconfirm it's just a vicious cycle. So with these drills at the surface level, you're activating these same cycles, but the outcome is oriented to a goal, like getting a high score or fast time, which is not detrimental. Because think about physical exercise. It's the same exact thing. If I go run a mile, my brain's saying he must be running from a lion. Obviously you're not, but it doesn't know that. But then you say, oh, I need to run this mile so I can lose this belly fat. Now what happens when you run that mile? Your brain says, pleasure. I successfully ran the mile. Now I'm closer to losing this belly fat. Because in real life, you're running a mile from an animal, is life or death. But now you're associating that same physiological stress to a productive outcome. Productive, not good or bad, but productive. Yeah. And that's the same thing with my drills. So that's the question I like to ask myself to say, there's rhyme and reason to this. You know, we ain't just doing this for fun. It can be fun sometimes, not always, but there's more to it. It's deeper than rap.
Yeah, no, well, but that's a great question and a great answer, because as you kind of touched on, obviously, you know, like you said, I think the athletes can obviously understand it, but I think that's a very good question you've obviously added to the podcast for, I guess, someone who, a non-athlete or someone who, I guess, wanting to understand it. So I guess one of the last things before I get into this last little game, if you would call the 20 questions, where can our listeners connect with you online if they want to find out more about you and, you know who you are and whatnot? How can they reach you?
The best place, there's several places. The best place is Instagram at Mr. MR Mental Muscle. Mr. Mental Muscle. Because I post daily there 2 to 3 times a day on my feed, about 15 times on my story. So I'm always giving some kind of information like what we've talked about on this whole podcast. So Mr. Mental Muscle on IG.
All right. Okay, so like I said, we're finishing off with what we call the Revo PT signature questions. So these are going to be 20 questions, quick fire response. Are you ready?
Yeah, Let's try it. Put my brain to the test.
Here we go. Squats or deadlifts?
Deadlift all day.
Bench press or military press?
Bench press.
Dumbbells or kettlebells?
Dumbbells.
Sled or hill sprints?
What was that?
Sled or hill sprints?
Ooh. Sled.
Row or bike?
Bike.
Box jump or broad jump?
Ooh. I'm a jumper too. That's what I did in college. Broad jump.
100 meter or 400 meter?
Broad jump.
Broad jump.
100 meter. Yep, 100 meter.
Long jump or high jump?
Long jump. That's what I did all day.
History or geography?
History. I love history. That's actually my first major in college of many. History.
Nice. Checkers or chess?
Chess. Even though I'm not that great at it.
Crosswords or Sudoku?
Crosswords.
Drive or navigate?
Drive.
If you could go back in time and live in another decade, what would it be?
I would say 1980s.
Yeah, me too. Favorite cheat meal?
Was that?
Favorite cheat meal?
Cheat meal. I love burgers. Like the real kind, not like McDonald's, like a legit mom and pop burger.
Oh, nice. 3 things that you can't live without.
Well, if I include my daughter, but I'll say that's a given, so I won't include that. But I would say mind, body, one, my business, because even though this is not going to be the end all, it's always going to be my forte, my baby. So mind, body, one, my grind. My laptop, because I do a lot of writing. I love to write. And my phone. Not to be cliche, but that's how I do all my networking and learning. I do it all on my phone. Yeah.
Fair enough. 2 books that everyone should read.
I'm going to choose a sports one and a non-sports one. So the sports one is called The Sports Gene by David Epstein. I don't know if you heard of that. That book is very good. It's got a lot of like how genetics and all that goes into sport performance. You learn a lot. There's a lot of history in it too. That's my sport choice. And my non-sport choice, I'm going to go with 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene. I read that back when I was like 18. I read it again when I was like 22. I like both of those, even though they're not nearly the same thing, but they both have relevance. I don't care who you are. Like, even if you're not an athlete, sports gene actually has relevance, believe it or not.
Okay, great. Good answer. Favorite movie?
The close one. That's 2 I really like. Remember the Titans or Good Will Hunting? I'm going with Good Will Hunting.
Now, you don't remember.
I love that movie, Good Will Hunting. I can relate.
That's the most popular answer on the podcast. And Good Will Hunting, I think, is a close second. Yeah, so you're right. That seems to be the one everyone likes. That's great.
Great minds think alike.
That's it. Do pineapples belong on pizza?
So I'm not going to stop you from eating it. If it is on there, I'll eat it, but I will never order it myself. How about that? I don't know if that's the answer, but
nice. All right.
I would not eat it if it's on the plate.
Yeah.
But I won't order it myself.
You won't order it yourself. That's a good answer. And then the final question is, what is the most interesting fact that you know?
The most interesting fact. Okay, I got to flex my president's knowledge, maybe. U.S. presidents. I actually won the president's or placed in the top 2. I don't remember, it was so long ago, for my whole countywide schools. So I know a lot about U.S. presidents. So I know the shortest term of a president is 30 days by William Henry Harrison. Most people don't even know who that is in America, but he was president for 30 days. He got elected, he was the 9th president, and he died 30 days later, allegedly from pneumonia. But some researchers say it was poison and he was like set up to be killed. But we don't know. But 30 days. He was only president for 30 days. Almost no one knows about that. He wasn't even that popular when he was alive, let alone the fact that he died. So he really did nothing for the world as a president. That was like in the early 1800s, so no one really cared.
Who preceded him? Like, who was the president after?
Number 10, so William Henry Harrison, John Tyler, James Taylor, Franklin Pierce. I think it was John Tyler. I actually know all 44 presidents. Because there's 44 presidents, not 45. Even though we're on the 45th, because one president was president twice, but not the same order. So he was the 22nd, 24th. So we counted him twice. So technically there was only 44, not 45. Donald Trump is the 44th president, technically.
Well, there you go. We should point out you are a
More.
history teacher, I believe. Is that correct? And,
Yep. It is no surprise why I became one. I love history.
No, I love it. All right, well, thank you so much for joining on the podcast. Listen, this was a great episode, great chatting with you. I want to give you the final word.
Well, I appreciate being on here. I loved every minute of it. This is very diverse in the questioning, and I love those type of podcasts. Not saying I haven't enjoyed other ones, but I love when I get asked questions that I'm typically not asked about me and what I do versus who I work with and stuff. So I really love that about this. And anyone out there listening, like I say, find me on Mr. Mental Muscle or my website, themd1.com. I'm always open to network. If you have any questions on what I do, how I do it, if you're interested in getting in this field, hit me up.
Oh, brilliant. We'll end on that. Like I said, this was episode 118 with Nicholas Davenport. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Your Revolution podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe so you are notified when a new episode is posted. Like all episodes, I hope you are leaving with some great things that can help you in your life and journey through health and fitness. Get after it, and as always, train with purpose.